Welcome to our first Pure Storage Leadership Series for 2025. This is organized by CDOTrends with kind sponsorship from Pure Storage. My name is Winston Thomas, the Editor-in-Chief for CDOTrends, and I will be your moderator today. This series continues our effort last year where we looked at the importance of storage in driving digital and data transformation from different perspectives. This year, we will be going deeper into AI, and our first topic for the series looks at future-proofing storage for AI. Is it a fool's errand or a strategic imperative? Even though it says storage in the title, we will be broadening the discussion on data architecture. Hopefully, during the discussion, we can talk about the secrets of AI storage beyond just capacity, learn about proven strategies when balancing lightning-fast performance with the ever-present pressure to control costs, especially with the latest revelations from DeepSeek and Mistral, and discover a truly holistic approach to data storage that goes beyond traditional thinking. To drive this discussion, we are fortunate to have Jean Picasso, manager for Wavestone, and we have Matthew Oostveen, Chief Technology Officer, Asia Pacific and Japan at Pure Storage. Of course, we also want you to be part of this discussion. We do not like this discussion to be a one-way traffic. So send in your burning questions and we will answer them directly through our panels. Please do use the Q&A button, not the chat button, but the Q&A button. And we will then look through the questions. Again, we will moderate the questions before asking the panelists. Now, enough from me, and let's start our discussion. And we shall start with our poll question. Just to help our panelists learn more about you and your challenges, we would like to ask what are the key challenges in AI adoption for you. There is a list of items there. Please check the one that comes closely to your perception. And we will look through the answers later on as we get into the panel. But while you're answering that poll question, let's gently start the panel discussion. And the first question I'd like to ask our panelists is, how can your current data architecture adapt to meeting the scalability demands of AI workloads without compromising performance? Maybe I can get Matt to start that discussion. Matt?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Winston. So I want to step back for a second because I've just come from a lot of travel around the region. I've been through east coast of Australia, Korea, Japan. I spent some time in the US and spoken at a lot of conferences. And I got a feeling for the theme that people are talking about, which is this deconstructing of silos and of using data to be able to get better outputs when it comes to deploying in AI use cases. And it seems to me the problem is that storage in all of this is something of an afterthought. And from my perspective, we are talking to customers that think about storage as this afterthought that they attach to a particular application, it's tuned for that particular use case, and then they kind of forget about it. And as this expands across an organization, you get more complexities, more types of applications. Now all of a sudden you start to run into this problem where we need to share data. And we need to try and deconstruct the silo. So what do? We do it at a software layer. You listen to what Snowflake or Splunk or any of these data organizations discuss, and it's about how to unlock all of that potential. And yet we're not talking strategically about that first fundamental baseline step about what we can do. How do we avoid building tomorrow's silos today? So I guess as we move into this world of AI, and there's a lot of excitement around it, how do we avoid the bottlenecks in the future? how do we ensure that we're not constructing another castle in the sky that's going to be problematic when it comes to retaining data, when it comes to sharing information, and when it comes to the ingest side? So I think all of these things are possible, but it requires a reset in where we're aligning our priorities. And I think people are starting to understand storage is much more strategic than they originally gave it credit for, certainly 5 years or 10 years ago. Now we're starting to get the CIO's attention, the CTO's attention, because they know if they put that fundamental building block in place, then they're able to start constructing and extracting more value from the data investments in their organization.
Thanks, Matt. Jean, your perspective?
Yes, indeed. So having a lot of AI and data background behind me, indeed, what I always took for granted is to have, a data warehouse that was built for this analytics purpose, but indeed, it's not the case for everyone. Where if you want to leverage on your data, you have to have a place for it. That you can easily, in fact, link your data together. And indeed, you can't do this on your usual location and storage where you store your data. You have to have a dedicated one that you can query in different manner and with quick answer. So indeed, it's something that also now needs to have capabilities also in connecting with your coding platform. And well, now we can talk about even another layer of also the kind of AI platforms that had hosting all the different LLMs, for instance. But indeed, this is something that I see at clients. They in fact are currently only leveraging on their own application data and kind of making it siloed. And the first feedback is if you want to have a holistic view on your customer, well, you can't just keep your just silos of customer data on this particular topic here and this here. You have to have it all in one place where you can, after that, in fact, have a kind of quality check, etc. So completely aligned with the views of Matt on this.
Matt, just wanted to ask, you mentioned foundational layer, and you've spoken to a lot of, as you mentioned, went through this whole spree of speeches and presentations across the Pacific Ocean, let's put it that way, on both sides of it. Where is the disconnect? Is it that people have been looking at the infrastructure layer and the guys who are managing it separately from the guy who managed the data architecture and the applications that surround it? Is that where the disconnect is? Because one of the things that AI does is, even though you put in an AI app, the demands on that storage architecture, you can't fit it into a pigeonhole. It just grows. It might even grow exponentially. You can't track it. So where's the disconnect?
The disconnect is going to depend on which country you're in. So if I visit Australia, and obviously that's where my accent is from, probably the world's highest uptake of public cloud. And therefore, they're having challenges around cost, around the ability to harness their own internal data sets that might be kept on premises, to say nothing of external databases that they may wish to tap into, particularly when we're starting to go down the path of retrieval augmented generation and agentic systems that are very intensive from a performance perspective. If you've made investments in NVIDIA stacks, for example, you want that data and that storage to be really close to that point of processing as well. So depending on where you are in the region is really going to depend on the type of challenge. But there is a persistent view that came from the past that storage, or where you keep your data at least, should be static. It should be centralized. And it's a lovely way to think about things because it's neat, isn't it? But the reality is that it's really dispersed and it's dynamic and it comes in different formats. And sometimes it's small files that fly at you really quickly. And other times it's, really large data feeds. So having a dynamic platform that enables you to cope with the different types of data that we are going to be using moving forward really is the type of thinking that we need to be shifting towards. So I think a lot of education is still required in the marketplace. I know that if you're an infrastructure person on this today, you probably get it. But how do we take that message to senior leadership? How do we get the CIO to realize that this is actually more strategic than it is? And that's starting to happen. But I guess that's one of the bigger challenges that's going to be faced by people on the panel.
John, your view, do you see that disconnect? Do you see that conversation actually happening as you speak to your customers?
Indeed. So here indeed we are talking about Gen AI, which is something I would say a dynamics is very different from I would say what we call now traditional AI. With traditional AI, you would have your data set and mostly, in fact, two options. Either it's BAU, where you would kind of know or expect what would be your workloads because on several timings. So, I mean, if it's BAU, you know that your process is going to run on this date, etc. real time. Research teams. This is where indeed I would say the workload has to be, I would say, dispersed. And in that case, even at the time, so something even now, let's say 10 years ago, you would when you would have some surge in requests for storage for very heavy modeling, you could even have a look forward vision where you could even plan your modeling like 6 months ahead. For instance, to have it in wintertime so that you wouldn't use so much, for instance, aircon or to ventilation to cool down your servers. Now, indeed, with Gen AI, with the complexity, in fact, of unstructured data and the processes behind, so in fact, vectorization of all your unstructured data, the question is, where do I store my files, but also where do I have the computing power? And now, in fact, you having a machine with all your GPUs on it, it's becoming more and more available now. But definitely with the need that you would have having something that is dispersed and the only requirement is to have it, I would say, on demand is a key thing.
Okay. Let's go back to the poll question that we asked, key challenges in AI adoption. Let's see what our audience says. Yes, cost. Stood out there. And there was no surprise, but it looks like 60% did say cost is a big issue. The other one is data sovereignty, which is another big issue that a lot of people will face, I guess, from this issue that highlights one of the biggest challenges. And we have business continuity and disaster recovery needs. So we have a lot of people looking at resilience as well as continuity as a challenge when it comes to storage. Matt, I think this speaks to what we have been talking about last year as well, but quick comment on the top three that you see.
I'll do my best to make it quick, Winston, because I'm a former researcher and we used to ask these kind of questions. And whenever we saw cost not come out at number one, it was always a big deal. So not surprised to see cost at number one. I don't want to dismiss that because it is valid, of course, but I want to come back around to it because there's something very topical that we should be talking about, and that's data sovereignty. Who owns your data? Where your data is located? Being able to prove the source of your data, should there be litigation when it comes to how you've trained your models? We're starting to see that becoming an issue as well. And being as delicate as possible with my language here, There is a lack of confidence in the current administration in the United States that is leading people to ask valid questions about where and who owns their data and where they should be taking control of that. If you go talk to the Gartner analysts at the moment, the number one inquiry that they're getting from their European customers is, how do I retain control of my data and sovereignty of my data? Should I have it sitting within a hyperscaler, for example? I expect that wave to hit Asia Pacific, probably happening now and over the next few months, where it is a critical challenge being faced by nations, by big industries that are domestic within particular countries. It could be healthcare, financial services, telecommunications, etc., pushing for clarity around sovereignty, around ownership, and just quietly looking for a plan B too. So I'll park that one there without going down a rabbit hole. The other thing I wanted to just talk about was cost. And and I'll probably talk about this a little bit later on, and I'm grossly generalizing here, but there are two sort of big reasons why AI POCs and pilots fail. There's a lot of POCs and pilots going on at the moment. The first is around proving that concept at scale. So yes, it works in a laboratory. Yes, we can get the LLM to do what we need it to do within the public cloud, but how do we scale that and do that economically? And I see time and time again, CTOs, CIOs falling over at that hurdle because they're really trying to build out on the wrong architecture. The second thing I would say is that there needs to be more education on what the alternative architectures look like for extracting cost. And there's some gaps that we can close there. But I've over-talked. I'll pass to Jean, get her inputs.
John?
For me, what I would comment is more on the data sovereignty and the business continuity one. Indeed, at the level of cost, I mean, we see that a lot of clients for now are going for POC, but they would say the move to production version is indeed some uncertainty on the output as well. So this is where the data sovereignty comes in. Who owns the prompt? Who owns the output? Where does it go in the middle? So it's a big question. In terms of the costs, indeed, this is something that a lot of for clients we did some POC on multi-agent solution where you would have querying, in fact, in natural language information on the databases. It worked perfectly. The clients were very happy, and then we did a FinOps view of it, and well, the cost of a query was extremely high. So in fact, we kind of just stopped there in saying, okay, it's working well, but is it worth really the cost per prompt that you do? So it's really something indeed that you have to keep in mind at the beginning. So moving to production again after having the POC done, is it worth, in fact, the money that you will invest in it? So yeah, this is my two points on these top three concerns.
John, I think that's a really valid point. I mean, when people do POCs, but then after doing a POC, they have to also rationalize whether even the POC must be successful, whether it's worth enough to actually scale it across the enterprise. I think that's a valid point. One other observation about costs, I was speaking to another AI engineer, and he was saying that it's funny. People talk about POCs and scaling as two different, as one budget, but it's not. Because POC is done by an internal research budget, which usually you can get government funding for. And then when they scale it out, then it becomes an enterprise budget. That's when they will balk. Is that true, John?
Yes, in fact, what you assessed in a POC is also the return on investment, and what determines whether you will move to production or not is this. And with Gen AI, especially with chatbot, with RAG, etc., especially with all the kind of copilot mode, copilot Gen AI solutions such as Gemini, Copilot, etc. What the clients are struggling, in fact, to put a dollar value on the advantage they get. You can kind of assess a bit of the timing, but overall, what we see at our clients, and that we have determined that, in fact, all these kind of copilot solutions are improving what we call the ROEE, so return on employee experience, because it will help them, in fact, in their daily tasks, small tasks here and there, and it's difficult to really put a dollar value on it. So that's why, in fact, there are so few, in fact, Gen AI POC that turns into production, except, in fact, the two most use cases that we see is about the coding, so support of coding. So and the other one is indeed this co-piloting thing. But even this, a lot of clients are just not paying for the full license because they don't see the value that it brings. What is changing now is that we are moving to the agentic era, where in fact these agents are taking actions and transforming processes. So it won't help one individual person in some of the task is doing. It will really help in kind of sorting out a whole process that is, in fact, also using natural language. So beforehand, we could have RPA that was solving processes, but you were kind of always stuck because, oh, it doesn't understand when I'm saying a bill instead of an invoice or something like this. And this is moving, and with agentic solutions, you manage to get a ROI and not a ROE. So which will move indeed in moving all this Gen AI era to something that is more present in companies.
Great. And then the question then becomes whether we are ready, our foundational layer is ready for agentic AI. Matt, I just wanted one other observation from the poll. ESG is rated one of the lowest. Are companies playing with fire by rating it low?
Interesting choice of words, playing with fire. I think ESG was one of the biggest topics that I spoke about probably 2 years ago. And there's a number of external forces that have reduced its intensity in customer conversations. The first is that AI has sucked all the oxygen out of the room. There is still a gold rush feeling to the AI era where organizations are, worried about missing out or worried about competitive disadvantage if they don't make advancements. So that comes at the expense of power and space and utilization and energy consumption. I think politics has played a big part in this as well. We've seen once again an administration change that has devalued the focus on sustainability and ESG. And I think the marketplace has responded to that. But let's bear in mind that a lot of the targets that larger organizations, multinationals have signed on for typically end at the end of a decade. So there's CO2 emission targets for 2030, 2040, etc. We're now mid-decade, and I would expect we start to see more focus coming towards that 2030 number as organizations that have made commitments to energy efficiency start to realize that they need to place more emphasis on that. The other factor is that it's not cheap going green. Okay, there is a fundamental cost to something. It typically, and I'll speak from my world, obviously, a mechanical hard drive emits or utilizes 20 times as much power as a solid state version of it. It weighs, 30 times as much. It takes up 10 times as much space, but it's a lot cheaper. Now, while a technology team may be understanding of this, and I find technologists really do want to make the right decisions here in implementing greener technologies in their environments. Are purchasing teams aligned with this? Is the board aligned with it? What does the CEO think or the CFO think? And those priorities, I think, have shifted somewhat over time, over the last 12 or 24 months. Look, the other thing is we're in this gold rush era at the moment. We're starting to move into what I would describe as wave 2.0. And that's where we're going to start to focus a little bit more on the utilization of the investments that we've made. So say, for example, a user has decided or a customer has decided to make a big investment in GPU technology from NVIDIA. Well, if we measure not just one organization, but across an industry, what the utilization of that asset would look like, it's probably sitting at between 7 and 10%. Okay. There's a lot that we can do with the investments that we've made already to ensure that we're not exceeding CO2 emission and they're not worried about the sustainability element. And I'll finish on one note. Maybe it's an important note. The focus is still there for energy consumption, but the lens has shifted. In the past, it was about how do I walk more lightly on the planet? How do I make my organization greener? Today, it's about how do I utilize the finite amount of power that I have inside my data center? How do I ensure that I don't need to build another facility and can eke out the most value from the investment that I've already made? So it does matter, but sometimes it's just viewed through a different lens.
Great. Thanks, Matt. We are getting questions from the audience, so thanks, Michael. We will be coming to your questions when we get into the agentic AI side, and I think it's an important question to answer and discern. Again, to the audience, please do send in your questions using the Q&A button, and I will be posing to our two panelists. Meanwhile, let's dive into the foundational layer. Matt, proximity. What role does proximity play when it comes to storage and compute resources, especially when you're trying to reduce latency in AI initiatives?
Well, that's the word, isn't it? It's latency. The speed of light has time. And this is why we see high frequency trading organizations trying to put their data closer to exchanges. And the same is true when it comes to AI systems. We want the two as close together as possible. And this is where we start to talk about concepts like data gravity. In the past, we made the data do the moving. We might have had an application stack sitting in, I don't know, public cloud or inside our data center. It doesn't matter for the purposes of the example. And you would move through the network this large amount of data to there. Now there's a sort of a view that we flip that on its head. Data's the new king. The king doesn't travel, you go to see it. So let's put the application, the infrastructure stack, closer to the source of where the data needs to be stored. And of course, not all data has the same characteristics. Not all of it needs to be what we might call a hot tier. Some of it could be in cold storage. That's fine for data mobility purposes. But ostensibly, you want those two as close to together as possible. Not just for the performance and the latency, but also there's an inherent cost built into transporting information across networks.
Jean, you have thoughts on that in terms of moving compute resources towards where it is being processed, especially in the AI era?
As Matt said, there is a cost, and the question is also about the need you would have. There is always, in the usage of the data you would have, is your data dating back from 2009 necessary? No, you would do maybe training on a very long period of time, but in fact, your data are going to run on or most recent data. So definitely, you always need a core and a warm storage in the where you would in fact have a quicker answer is where you would have immediate and quicker access to it. I don't have much more to say than this.
Okay.
Can I say just one more thing on this? The start of this year was pretty interesting time to be in the AI space because, DeepSeek hit, and a lot of the news surrounding that and the excitement with it. One of the things that I took away from that is we're getting better at building models, and we're getting better at building lighter SLMs, small language models. And I think that prophecy that many people have been talking about in years past of edge AI is really starting to be manifested through the development of such technologies. So if we do have a hypothetical where these systems are sitting beyond the corporate network, outside the cloud, outside the data center, then there are some circumstances where, of course, we would want to move data closer to those small language models as well, and the particular use cases. Maybe it's in kiosks, or it's in retail, or it's in IoT deployments across mines or utility networks, etc. But I think we will start to move to a more balanced world where, yes, we'll have centralized storage systems that are highly efficient. You'll have cold storage areas as well for data that we don't touch as often. And then we're also going to have to interconnect that with this new world of edge AI and edge compute that we're probably moving towards as well, particularly as models get more efficient, which they need to do.
That's great. But of course, we still need to make sure our definition of AGI doesn't change, because OpenAI just added super intelligence on top of it.
Oh, hang on. Let me be clear. I said edge AI, not AGI.
Okay. Edge AI. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
that's my Australian accent. Apologies, Winston. Thank you for your patience.
That's my Singlish years, but that's fine. Let's jump into agentic AI. How does all of this change when it comes to the agentic AI? Because now you have agents, AI agents actually going around learning, and in some cases, there might be consolidation of data just because the task requires it. So, Matt, from your perspective, how does that actually impact storage?
Well, we're pragmatic about this. Certainly, customers are pursuing this path, and we're happy that they are, because they're going to get better outcomes than trying to run off-the-shelf systems. What we're cautious of here is the creation of honeypots from a bad actor or from a security perspective. We're starting to consolidate large amounts of data that might be in data warehouses, data lakes, where else we got in there? Databases, I suppose. What can we do from a protection perspective to make sure we keep the bad actors away? So I think as we move down this path, we're starting to see security becoming a more important discussion within the AI realm, certainly more than it was 6 months, 12 months ago.
Yeah, so indeed, cybersecurity of AI is definitely something that has to move along with all the improvements in fact, the surge of AI that we see currently, because obviously, in fact, the hackers and the attackers are using also Gen AI and agentic AI to attack. So I would say the attacks become more and more sophisticated. So you have to keep up and have a stronger cybersecurity by default and by design. So there are numerous ways of I would say applying controls to avoid these kind of things. One that I had in top of my mind is, of course, the access to databases, access to data. It started, even this kind of first concern of cybersecurity with the age of AI started even with the deployment of a Copilot for M365, where in fact, if you added an enterprise, in fact, you still had to manage, in fact, the access of each folder, because if there was somewhere confidential file that was sitting, but with everyone having access. Previously, you wouldn't have access to it because you wouldn't have the path to access it. In fact, with GenAI, in fact, the Copilot would be able to see, in fact, this file, no matter whether you had visibility and accessibility of visibility, sorry, of the URL. So this first concern started 3 years ago now, and is now bringing in fact more and more concerns with agents, because you would access to different applications and different databases, and this access management would be key. This is even at the layer of the storage of your training data. As you may know, in fact, there is an attack on the AI systems called poisoning, where you can poison your model, you can poison your training data. And in fact, if you don't protect even your storage or your training data are sitting, you can have a malicious actor that are adding some documents, adding some data, or stealing from there, and that will affect, in fact, the output. So this is definitely, in fact, I mean, this is just one example of an attack on an AI system that is, I mean, existing. I mean, there's a lot of examples for this, and it has to be protected. And access security is accessing, restricting, and hardening the access is one of the ways of controlling it.
Matt, Jean talks about data access. Do you see baking storage security or data access security in the storage subsystem as a given in the future?
I think it has to be. Well, I mean, we have a lot of conversations around RBAC, so role-based access control. Essentially, who can access what matters. And I know everyone's probably tired of these data is like analogies, but I've been talking lately that data is like uranium. Okay, it's incredibly dangerous to leave it lying around, but it's of course incredibly useful when the right person gets hold of it. So building on that, essentially, how do we ensure that we keep those bad actors away, but without getting in the way of good data utilization? We still want velocity inside our organizations. Senior leadership and decision makers need to get the right access to information. They need to do that quickly. So ensuring that you're connecting the data appropriately, ensuring that you have the right rings of security around your organization are absolutely paramount. And ensuring that the basics are covered. I mean, the most common type of attack that an organization is going to face is going to be a ransomware attack. It is the du jour or the choice of crime gangs around the world to encrypt massive data sets, and then, of course, to charge money for that to be unlocked once again. So making sure that you have immutability within your backup and your snapshot technology so that it can't be altered, it can't be deleted, even if you have a rogue system administrator. We have a technology at Pure that enables us to peer into an organization's data sets and actually be able to detect in real time when a ransomware attack is occurring in a block-based environment. I mean, no other company on the planet can do that. And of course, being able to talk to a customer and tell them that one of these attacks is happening in real time, to do it discreetly, to pick up the phone and say, let's work together and stay out of the news. So that we can protect valuable data. I think that's the path forward, as being much more proactive with protecting against either bad state actors or the cyber gangs that we're seeing emanating from many countries.
John, we have a question from the audience, very specifically for you, because you mentioned about how agentic AI solution will lead to ROI instead of ROE. How different is the evaluation versus traditional RPA?
I mean, the way of calculating a ROI for agentic solution versus RPA is similar. Just that consider that where we are going to use agent instead of RPA is just that it will be able to understand natural language. So previously you would have, for instance, you start your process automation with email incoming with this particular keyword, and now you don't want necessarily to have this keyword, but something a bit broader to really understand, I would say, the bigger picture of whatever unstructured data that you have. So this is where, in fact, the performance of your automation and your, in fact, agent will be higher than RPA. So your ROI will be higher.
And thanks, Michael, for that question. Again, to the audience, please do keep the questions coming. We'll be posing them to our panelists. I'm switching to metrics. When we talk about metrics and benchmarks, have they changed, or do we need to change them when assessing the effectiveness of your current data architecture with agentic AI in mind? Maybe I'll pose that to Jean to start that off.
To me, metrics, I will go not one step back, but maybe two or three. The recommendation that we have when setting up AI and Gen AI is to determine, in fact, a governance, in fact, and also, I would say, the pillars that each company sets around the usage of AI engineering. This is where they will determine, in fact, the kind of metrics and the kind of pillars that they want to assess the use of Gen AI towards. So some of them will be, they would want to achieve a certain sustainability metrics, meaning that I want to use Gen AI, agentic AI, but with the same level of CO2 emission. This could be one, for instance. You could have another one, which is, of course, to have a number of I don't know, ROI higher, customer complaints less, etc. So I would say this really depends on what the kind of key pillars and key values, I would say, that you want to put on your Gen AI solutions and in your AI in general in your company.
Matt, do you have thoughts on that in terms of benchmark, especially when it comes to determining whether your storage system is working on par?
It gets technical really quickly, Winston. So I'll try not to get into weeds here, but when we're really talking to a customer about what they need from a data platform perspective, now we're starting to talk about the namespace size. We're having conversations around the I/O, around bandwidth, around throughput, around availability. There are some other discussions as well for maybe larger scale organizations, not quite a hyperscaler, but maybe a top 20 organization around the world. And now we're probably going to have a conversation around even the weight of the rack, the power draw of that system. And then not asking that question from a green perspective. They're asking that question because they want to understand how they can redistribute energy across their data center, which I was saying earlier is a finite resource for them and an important resource for them, because as a footnote, people on the audience right now will be aware that the Amazons, the Microsofts, the Metas of the world have just signed multi-year contracts with nuclear energy providers in the United States to be able to provide the amount of power that we need as we move down this path. So certainly predicated on the size and the need, there are performance metrics, there are uptime and reliability metrics, and there are, we'll call them environmental and utility style metrics as well. And typically there's a bunch of those that we would need to be able to meet for a customer's needs.
We have around 5 minutes left in the discussion. I have a question, and I'll reframe that question because we're talking about Gen AI accuracy. But I'll go back to the first question that we started this entire discussion on in terms of future-proofing data architecture for AI. Is it a fool's errand or a strategic imperative? Yes, we can all talk about strategic imperative, but one of the things that we have seen is AI has evolved quite a lot, and there is a lot of optimization that is going on, as you can see with DeepSeek. And that might even change the way we approach building some of these models. So the question then is, and there is also the accuracy issue with Gen AI, which is getting better with the RAG, but it comes with its own challenges with storage, especially with vector embeddings. So the question is, are we ready to future-proof storage for AI, or are we looking at this question from a deterministic point of view, while AI is still very probabilistic and it's still evolving? Maybe Matt, you can take a stab at it.
Is it a fool's errand? Well, no, I think it's an admirable direction of travel. It's not something that you're going to solve with the acquisition of a product or a single solution. This is a strategic imperative that incorporates the people that work with the technology, the application stack, the processes, the infrastructure, etc. But firstly, prioritizing where your data is stored. If you want to call that storage, fine, whether it's a public cloud or on-premises or otherwise. But here's the thing, and I think you touched on it. It's moving really quickly, this space. And we're not really sure what the next 6 months or 12 months will bring. At the moment, there's some fascination around LLMs, granted. But what when we hit the era of the LQM, the large quantitative model, we train those models differently. We may need similar infrastructure to be able to run them, but we're not 100% certain as to where the next advance will take place. So therefore, avoiding this concept of the silo and having flexibility in your infrastructure is paramount. From our perspective, we want to make sure that any resource that we put inside a customer's organization is flexible, it's adaptable, you're able to scale it up or scale it down, predicated on the usage pattern. And we don't want a senior leader inside an organization to feel boxed in or cemented because they've made a particular infrastructure choice. But here's the bigger point. I think what really matters here is the people working with the technology. If I'm a senior leader inside a bank or any other organization, I want the best possible models. I want my data science team to be producing very efficient outputs that are accurate. And I don't want them making concessions predicated on the underlying stack. Right? I want them to be as creative and as bold as possible to produce the best output for my organization. Why should they need to work around constraints or bottlenecks that sit in storage or in compute or on the network, etc.? That should be absolutely invisible, because the more important things are happening on top of the stack. So we need to get the fundamentals right and allow the smarter people here that are working on the AI models to do so with the freedom and the capability to provide a better outcome for their organization. I think that's the direction of travel. That's going to need some flexibility, and it's going to need some sponsorship from senior leadership inside companies to acknowledge that there is a link between those two.
John?
Yes, agree. Meaning with every model kind of overachieving the other one a couple of days or 1 week later. So indeed, there is a lot of juggling around. In fact, the best model, the best platform, because in fact now we are not only talking about LLMs, we're also talking, for instance, about LangChain, where you change in fact your whole coding platform. So yes. This is definitely the big question where, in fact, you don't know what is expecting, and you just expect that you won't have any limitation in accessing, in fact, these new models that are coming up every by the minute, actually.
Thanks for that. We have come to our end of our discussion. Maybe I'll ask Matt to sort of give his key takeaways that we want the audience to remember.
I promise you, I will be succinct. But I would just say, think strategically. Storage isn't an afterthought. Maybe the old world was, but we need to think about how we can access and utilize all the data investments that we have inside our organization, whether in the public cloud, whether on premises, whether on the edge. How do we centralize a policy? How do we utilize the assets better? For example, why, if I've got a storage system attached to a database that's sitting at 90% capacity, why do I need to buy more capacity for that if my SAP environment or my AI environment is only at 15% capacity? Let's not think in silos anymore. Let's start thinking holistically at that basis layer, and then we can start to solve some of the bigger challenges that we've got in IT.
John?
It's the same direction again, but a bit with a broader picture, more centralized around AI. It's indeed on the what you put behind the trustworthiness of AI, which is in fact what's the whole infrastructure and a whole supply chain that will allow you to trust your outcome and your whole, in fact, AI chain. So indeed, flexibility, reliability, fairness. In that case, some case it would be also to have something that is flexible, that is cost effective, that is quick enough, etc. So it's again really on the values that you want to put in your AI and your system.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Matt. We have come to the end of our discussion. I will also encourage you to reach out to either one of our panelists or both of them to continue the conversation. I'm sure you'll have some of the questions coming out of this discussion. But at this moment, I would also like your feedback. We will have a QR code appearing on screen. Please do scan this and just tell us what you think about the discussion. Your feedback will help us to tailor our coming discussions as we architect it or design it in the coming months. Please do ignore the question about the moderator. Just kidding. But anyway, looking forward to your feedback. For now, on behalf of our panelists from Pure and Wavestone, thank you for joining us, and certainly look forward to seeing you in our next panel discussion.